Welcome back to Get Over Your Shit, the podcast dedicated to helping digital course creators, entrepreneurs, and small business owners stop overthinking and start executing. I'm Malinda Watt, your host and fellow overthinker, here to guide you through the maze of self-doubt and procrastination that keep us stuck. Today, we're diving into a topic that resonates with so many of us: burnout. How to recognize and combat burnout, especially when it sneaks up on us in the fast-paced world of business and life. My guest, Ashleigh Grange, is an expert in integrative health and intuitive wellness and holistic energy. She blends ancient wisdom with modern strategies like frequency medicine, flower essence, and Akashic Records to guide her clients in reconnecting with their inner healer. Ashleigh believes self-care is not just a luxury, but a crucial part in preventing burnout and sustaining long-term success. In this episode, we'll explore how to identify burnout symptoms, take preventative action, and integrate self-care practices that rejuvenate the body, mind, and spirit, creating the balance we need to thrive.
Ta-da!
Ta-da, here we go.
Miracle.
On today's podcast, we're going to talk about burnout isn't a badge of honor. And what I really love about everything it is that you offer is that there are alternatives around sort of that approach to self-care that look very different than what people assume. And so one of those things is the focus on vibrational and frequency-based health. So can you share what led you down the path of moving from, being that a practitioner to then adapting this approach as well?
This is a type of modality that perhaps people are not necessarily so familiar with, but something that is kind of like the core of the work that I do is working with flower essences. And I discovered flower essences over 15 years ago in a most unusual place. It's a place that people would never expect. It wasn't on Facebook. I didn't read a book about it. It wasn't something that I just happened to find through a friend. But I was 25 years old. My dad was just kind of on the precipice of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. We knew something was going on, didn't quite know what that was. He was in the early stages at that point, his late 50s. And I had gone to the doctor, and of course, Alzheimer's is a chronic terminal health condition. The health practitioners will say to your face, there's nothing you can really do, right? You can't cure it, you can't fix it, you can't resolve it in any way. The only thing you can really do is help make your life a little bit better, which I think is what this type of work and this type of healing really aims to do, is just make life a bit better. And so the doctor handed me a sheet of paper. It looked like uh, you know, it's not that long ago, but it looked like it had been printed on a dot matrix printer. It just had a list of various things, lion's mane, and maybe mushrooms were on there. Like, this doctor seemed to be fairly cutting edge because most people would not cover those things: meditation, exercise. And on that list was flower essences. I remember thinking at the time, like, what the heck is a flower essence? Like, I don't know how this is going to help my dad's brain. Not sure why you're even recommending this. And like, an army doctor. So he had been in the forces for decades and decades. And this was probably like the second or third time I'd even seen him. So it's not as if he had a relationship with my dad at all. It was just, here's some resources maybe to look into. And on that list was flower essence. And that was kind of the first vibrational healing tool that I ever used. And since then, I've started to use other tools, including sound therapy and all kinds of other things. But that was the core of where I first discovered that, is through this little slip of paper in a doctor's office in Angus, Ontario. He's no longer in practice, but he's retired now. But
Oh, but did you find when you implemented that in the care for your dad that you noticed a difference? Because that's what one of the things we have in common is that we both had a parent with Alzheimer's. So
that's right. Yeah. And the kind of principle, or the thing to keep in mind, is that whenever we're doing any kind of health work, always address your own complaints and issues first before you attempt to help another person. So I might have had issues with, behaviors that my dad was showing. Medications can really make it very difficult for us to obviously like move forward, and they can have side effects from that. So, night terrors and things like that, right? So I had to address my own, issues with, oh, I couldn't sleep because I was fearful, or I was afraid of something that might happen to him. At the same time, you can help him sleep better, feel better, have a better response to stress, right? So even things like rescue remedy, for example, it's probably a flower essence that many people might have heard of. It's that little blend that, is kind of the go-to, right? You have stress, you have anxiety, you have tension in your life, try this essence. And so it's a neat kind of, we'll call it the gateway to flower essences. Is a lot of people, it's like, just take some of this, you're going to feel better, I swear. And so that's how I kind of approached it in that way.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And especially that you took the time to recognize the possibility of your own burnout
Yes.
in that scenario.
A perfect example is that I didn't really understand how that worked, right? I was a full-time caregiver while also running a full-time business. Like burnout was my middle name. I was teaching at the college at the same time. So
Yeah.
it's like we had all these factors, and the reality is that most people have never met a 25-year-old caregiver. I mean, that's rare. Maybe there's a little bit more awareness about it now than there was when I was doing it, but it was, you know yourself, that's a full-time gig in itself. So burnout, a perfect example of running our business, taking care of anyone, whether or not that's someone that's older or whether or not that's our kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
They call it, they call us right now of being the sandwich generation, right? We still have young kids at home while at the same time our parents are getting older and aging. So it's like we're in the perfect storm of people who might be exposed to something like burnout, and just even, the languaging around it that we use really in holistic health is the idea of adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout. It's really, we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. And self-care isn't just necessarily going for massage,
Exactly.
right? So how do you personally see self-care as pulling that into a business strategy and making sure that you're taking that time to, ward off burnout in your business specifically?
Yeah. And so you just think of the classic modality, right? Which is put your own mask on first before you attempt to help
Mm,
someone else, right? It's a perfect example is like, how are we able to be productive, effective, go getters, really, if you're an ambitious woman in business? How are we able to do that if our health is failing, right? If we didn't sleep well the night before, our kid was up all night because they were sick, or we're caregiving for someone else, or, you just have a lot of stress and anxiety. Maybe you're in a field where you're dealing with big sums of money. Maybe you're a financial planner and something didn't work out or a mortgage fell through, right? Like you're taking on the stress and anxiety that, other people are experiencing, and you might be feeling it yourself in your business. So self-care becomes kind of the foundation, right? It's finding those simple ways to do self-care without it being a big commitment, right? Because many of us would probably argue we don't have time for 3 to 5 hours of self-care. Like I got 15 minutes, and what am I going to do in this 15 minutes? And I put at least 5 minutes of meditation, maybe some deep breaths, definitely some flower essences. And flower essences we can use like all during the day, right? Just put it in your water. It just becomes one of those easy everyday kind of routine practices that we can do.
and that leads me actually to my next question that I have for you is, what would you say to someone who feels like they don't have time for self-care because their to-do list is never ending, like so many of us?
I always say, like, we do have time. It's however you're prioritizing your time, right? And then also being able to ask for help, right? That's the key factor. And something I didn't do as a caregiver, but certainly I've realized since becoming a mom, it's that if we, you really need a break and you have no one to call on, do you have a friend? Do you have a family? Can you pay someone to help out? I love like, just this perfect example of like someone coming to my house and like doing some meal prep and maybe cleaning a little bit and then also watching my kid. It's like the dream, right? So those little aspects where it's like, how do we incorporate this without it costing a lot of time or money? Because business, that's everything, right?
Yeah, or maybe even finding, a community that you could trade off things to, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Find a great friend who your kid gets along with and, say, I'll give you 2 hours, you give me 2 hours, that sort of thing too.
exactly. Yeah, it's that aspect of even bartering, right? And people will say, like, oh, I don't have anything to barter. I'm like, trust me, I'm a mom. Like, you got so much to barter. There's so much that you could help me with. And yeah, finding those
Yeah,
ways to just like carve out a little space for yourself, right? Like even
yeah,
if you're the busiest person alive, you can't tell me you don't have 5 minutes literally as you're falling asleep to meditate in some way. And in fact, if you meditate just before bed, chances are you're going to sleep better and you're going to be able to wake up feeling a little bit more rested because your mind has had a chance to kind of relax and go into that, out of that fight or flight that might have been running
yeah.
your day.
And that's exactly how I used, when we were working together, bioengineeric scans.
Yeah,
I wanted to make sure I got it right. But that's exactly how I would use them. I would take time sort of when I was working to be listening, listening. And then from that, I even started to learn about the bilateral beats and whatnot and helping with focus. But I would fall asleep to that regularly. And when I find that I'm really sort of feeling chaotic, I go right back to it. I had a few different scans done and there was always a pretty similar playlist that developed from that. And so I come right back to it to sort of, ground myself again. And like you said, you can fall asleep listening to that and, you're doing good without
and
feeling like you're adding to your to-do list.
yes. And for people who aren't familiar, that's just a type of like sound healing, right? So we use the binaural beats, and it's essentially a communication between the left side and the right side of the brain. And that gap in between is what's considered the binaural beat. So that allows us to really work with the subconscious mind, really clear out patterns, emotional kind of aspects that might come up, limiting beliefs. So perfect really for all scenarios.
Yeah. And so to that, what are some of the subtle signs? Because I don't think that necessarily we realize that, what we might be experiencing is burnout, so what are some of the signs that you sort of help clients pick out of, or I guess if they haven't even become a client yet, because maybe they haven't even realized that that is what they're experiencing. So what are some of the things that you're pointing out to your clients that this is actually burnout?
Yeah, I think that's perfect kind of reflection is that so many people don't even realize they might already be in a state of burnout, right? They just kind of adapt and adjust and experience life from this place of fight or flight. It's not
Mm,
something that they are even realizing is abnormal because they've lived the last 10 years, 20 years of their life in that state. So
yeah.
they may or may not be clients at that point because they haven't realized it. But I think sleep is a big one when people start to realize, like, hey, I'm either sleeping not at all, I am not sleeping well. I'm not waking up feeling refreshed. And conversely, maybe I'm sleeping too much. Like maybe I'm needing 14, 15 hours, right? Because the truth is that when our adrenals start to go, our thyroid is going to be heavily affected too. So just the ability to have the energy, the strength, the motivation even to get out of bed is going to be a big one for people. I also think people will probably notice changes in their diet and their bodies. If the food that they're craving is high sugar all the time, it's like you're using high sugar foods kind of as a replacement for the energy that you would have gotten from sleep. But you're staying up till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, either working on your business or simply just in this like mind space of needing to kind of de stress after your workday. And you're just not able to turn that mind off, right? You're not able to turn that monkey mind off so that you can actually like settle.
Mm,
I feel like
yeah.
those are some of the key ways that people really start to realize, like, hey, this is not healthy, and I'm not moving in the direction that I want to move in, especially when it comes to your business. Because I don't know about you, but you need to be full on. You need to be present in your business, especially if you're working with anyone else, right? If you're working with clients or anything along those lines, you can't show up as 50% of the person that they hired you to be.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's such a shift of this idea that, it's supposed to be easy and not stressful necessarily, or it shouldn't take a lot of time to run your business or do the things that your business might need from you. But actually, there's a lot of deep work that has to go into, building out the things, the services, taking care of other people. There's deep work that has to go into that, that needs focus and your mind to, work properly. And
It's a perfect like knowing your value, right? So if you have limiting beliefs come up, they always say like the best way to like really experience your shadow self is start a business. This is going to expose you to all those aspects where you're like, oh, I guess that isn't standard. Not everyone thinks the way that I do. And it's going to affect you in business when you go to set your prices, right? How much does XYZ charge? People start to ask, right? It's like,
yeah,
how much is I mean, I was going to say a banana, but I guess banana has a pretty consistent price. But, how much does a 1 hour coaching call cost, right? Like, could be any price. Could be
yeah.
$5, could be $5,000, could be more. So it's kind of like when we set prices for ourselves, right? It's a good kind of indicator of exploring some of those aspects of ourselves.
Yeah, and can we set a price that recognizes our value? And we have to see our own value and be, stand firm in that in order to be able to grow and not take on clients that make us regret that we took them on and to begin with, right? We have to set a price that values us and them as well.
And
So,
values in business, right? That aspect of sustainable income
yeah.
is really important. Right? We learn that pretty quickly when we start working with clients is that, you don't want to be necessarily in a state where you're having to get clients every day just to keep your business going, right?
Yeah.
Having sustainable packages and programs and all of that becomes kind of the way to move forward.
And so what small shifts do you see people making as they start to adapt those things, early on in their business? Sometimes we think of a medication, you could be 3, 5, 10 weeks to sort of feel like the medicine's doing something for you. But what do you find with this natural approach in terms of clients seeing a change? Because we want that immediate result, right? We want to fix it. We want to feel like we're making progress, so we stick with it. So what are you seeing?
I think natural health, holistic type of approaches can be as fast or as slow as they need to be. I think you can legitimately see a huge change when addressing burnout and similar symptoms in a week. I think literally just having a week's worth of good sleep is going to make all the difference. I also think the other kind of key aspect of that is that, what's our level of awareness, right? How much are we tuning into our own selves, our own bodies, our own, brains about really the changes that we've noticed, right? If you go from a state of frenzy and chaos and trying to do everything and, we don't have enough money and I don't have enough people and I'm building this big business, you're not going to come at it from a place that's really aligned and really feels comfortable, right? And at some point, if you're in that state of burnout long enough, I mean, your body's obviously going to tell you when it starts to shut down, right? We're going to tune into some of those symptoms, right? The old, like, look for, where there's sparks, there's probably fire, right? So it's like, let's get to the point where we start noticing those symptoms in the body. Maybe it's a tummy ache, maybe it's constant migraines, maybe it's, a foot pain that just hasn't gone away for weeks. It's like your body is trying to send you a message. Your body is sending you some kind of communication that if you don't heed the message, it's going to evolve into this fire, right? It's a full blown, oh, I'm diagnosed with something. I have a chronic condition. Something just come up. It's like it didn't come up overnight, right? In most cases, obviously, there's acute changes like that. But I think a week's worth of good sleep. I notice it as a mom. I'm sure you do too. Like a couple nights of poor sleep, like I'm no good to anyone until I can catch up on that, right? And certainly as we head into our 40s and perimenopausal and moving those out,
Mhm.
like sleep that we used to take for granted in our 20s and maybe might have abused or taken advantage of, we can no longer do. So
Yeah.
like I don't really, I personally don't really subscribe to and there's lots of experts that will tell you differently, but the principle that some people are like just night owls and some people are just like day owls. It's like you might feel that you're getting work done at night, but I also think there's this, circadian rhythm that runs the body and runs like our exposure to light is a big part of that. You notice a big difference as the seasons shift, right? Suddenly we're not getting the amount of light that we might have had otherwise, and that's going to affect our ability to sleep well and sleep soundly, and then
Yeah.
throw burnout in there. And then how's anybody supposed to get anything done, right? Like you showing up on a live or on social media when you haven't had a full night's rest, like nobody's going to get the value out of that than they would if you had been well rested and your stress levels are down, you feel grounded.
You can't fake it till you make it. Like, I mean, you really can't unless you're, taking care of yourself. And social media is, the highlight reel of everyone's lives.
Exactly.
There's starting to be a shift, but it kind of just depends on who you put into, who you're following and putting into your feed of, ultimately how that's going to affect, the decisions of, maybe how you feel about yourself or what you might do in your business. So I'm curious what some of the first things that you do when life gets hectic. What are your sort of first sort of go-tos? Is it sleep first and then
Sleep for sure. Sleep is like definitely on the top of my list. And I'm pretty protective now, knowing that, this is, I made a joke the other day, but I was like, well, we almost made it till Thanksgiving without a sick day. That sick day was yesterday. So
would?
having a little guy at home, it's like, oh, wow, like my plans for the day, all the things is just suddenly disappeared. And did I get a good night's sleep the night before? No, of course not. So how much did I get done in my business yesterday? Um, so I think sleep is obviously a core part of that. The other thing that I would just like swear by and tell everybody to do is to download that app, Insight Timer. I just love it. I think 5 minutes of meditation, 50 minutes of meditation, like anything, you can kind of just like brings you back into your body, allows you to sleep better, allows you to have an awareness. Like this is just temporary. Like, it's really, um, a really interesting perspective on we are not our thoughts and our thoughts are not us. And then of course flower essences, I would say for sure. They're like $10, $20, use them every day for all kinds of scenarios. Do you have,
I do and have some on my shelf right here.
you need some for sure? Yeah, because I remember that's right. I can't remember which one you got, but
I think Hornbeam is
Hornbeam.
one I rely on for sure.
Perfect. Yeah. Amazing for motivation. Just get things done. I call it like the Monday morning blahs, like just this factor of like, that's a task I really don't want to do. And I'm either going to send it to my VA or I'm going to find a way to do it. So it gives you the kind of motivation, like, I don't really want to meal prep today, but I know it's going to be good for me. So give me
Yeah.
the energy to do that. So flower essences for sure. I think even just a gentle walk, just being able to ground, like whatever people feel comfortable with, I think is good. Like taking your shoes off, hanging out on the grass, I think is just a great way of just allowing our energies to recalibrate. And how many people can still feel stressed and anxious when they're out in nature? I don't know too many.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. And so to that, what is one simple practice that you would recommend someone who is new to a natural approach even of, taking on burnout and trying to sort of find their way out of it? Really those simple strategies that they can start.
If I only did one thing, it would probably be to download that app because it's something that you literally, if you have a phone, you can download that app. You can
Yeah.
find, one for stress or burnout or anxiety or frustration. Anger might be an emotion that comes up. And, one of the principles of my work really is that every single physical complaint issue in the body has one or more emotional patterns. So when we can start to improve our emotional and mental health, we can start to improve our physical body. And ultimately, so many different relationships about specific things in the body. And someone will say, well, what about this? And that can't have an emotional connection, but it does. And when you really drill down, it's a perfect way. Just by meditating, we can kind of like start to refresh and start to clear some of those patterns where it's like maybe my default response isn't anger. Maybe my default response isn't just to kind of be a people pleaser and like play dead while people walk all
Yeah.
over me, right? So that ability to even start expressing yourself and expressing your boundaries, like meditation can teach us so much, and literally 5 minutes a day. I mean, the more the better, really, for me. And I think it's really, really cool. It's a free app. It has thousands of meditations that meditation teachers all around the world have contributed and continue to contribute. And so if you're into more woo-woo stuff, they've got stuff for you. If you're like my husband, you just want the stress, the anxiety, the, kind of tuning in, that's, they've got meditations for that. So it's just a
Yeah, it's a really great app. I know I have it on my phone. I haven't opened it recently, but there was, if there's someone's voice that you just don't resonate with or the vibe, the energy that they're giving off, you can just find someone else. Like there's so many people to pick from. And it's interesting too. You can join like a live class if you sort of find someone that you really like.
Yes,
Um,
love those, and they come up all the time. And then they have even more. Like if you have the paid version of the app, they have like courses and programs. So you can do a 7-day course on developing your intuition. You could do a 7-day course on how to be more productive, how to conquer burnout. I'm sure there's one for that. So if anybody is currently in the throes of burnout,
yeah.
check out that app. It might have exactly what you need. Uh,
That,
but it's just a resource that everyone can have. I love that they provide so much value for free, and I really think there's like no, like, other than our own kind of habit of just opening it up and doing it, there's no real reason why we shouldn't be using it all the time.
Yeah. And to let our family know, that I know that I can say, to my son who's 11, I'm closing the door because I'm getting on a call and I will be out in this amount of time. And, so I think that it's fair to say that we can ask that of the people around us, right? That sometimes we don't feel like we can kind of disappear and take a few minutes, but we really can if we sort of have to teach the boundary, right? He knows that the door's closed right now. He could listen and know that I'm talking to someone. But I know that I can confidently sort of have this conversation with you without being interrupted unless there's an emergency. So I think, as we head into even those late toddler years, if you can find an activity to give them and just, spend a few minutes, even in the busyness of a day, especially, as entrepreneurs and trying to balance and there's lots of entrepreneurs too that are also, homeschoolers like we are. And like, I mean, there's your day can absolutely get away from you. You can still take a few minutes to recenter yourself and, save the day, we'll say, right? Instead of letting it totally fall off track.
If you're one of those people that says like, well, I just can't meditate, I can't like turn my monkey mind off, it's like you're exactly the person that this is intended for, right? Like your type A personality, go do all the things. Like we know, like you and I are living proof, right? And
Yeah.
like don't wait to the point where you're actually in burnout, right? You're starting to see some of the symptoms, you're starting to realize like your body's sending you messages like maybe this isn't healthy. There's the stat that 70 to 80% of all health complaints issues are associated with stress, right? So it's like, even if you think, oh, well, I don't have a diagnosed health condition, but you have mega, mega stress, it's like that's going to show up in your body. And for women, that might show up in the reproductive system. It might show up in super heavy periods. It might show up in the form of fibroids. It might show up in the form of cervical dysplasia, right? So there's lots of ways where it's like our body's sending us a message. It's just a question of whether or not we're heeding it. We might not necessarily link what's going on in our cervix with, what's happening in our business or the lack of boundaries or any of those aspects. So all for me, all kind of physical health complaints, including burnout, have an emotional layer underneath them. It's just, it might be one that's like easily cleared. 5 minutes of meditation does it. Or it might be like in my case where I've got to really like chisel it out. There's like a hammer. We're going through the layers. We're going to keep doing it. Right. It's like this journey is not something that, we have come to the end after a couple of weeks, right? It's
Yeah.
years and potentially longer.
You're never checking it off the list, right? Like, I mean, it is, and it's part of the reason I call the podcast "Get Over Your Shit" because really, ultimately, for me, it was about just sort of getting in my own way,
Yes.
and then sort of recentering myself and being open to a lot of different modalities so that I could just find something that worked and felt like I was starting to make progress. And also, keeping track of that, knowing that I'm kind of making a list of like, oh, well, this is better now and that's better. And
Exactly.
and and not crossing off the list and then deleting the list. Like, I love seeing all those check marks in my app of, I did these things.
And that's funny because with Insight Timer too, it like tracks how many minutes you're meditating and how many.
Yeah, it
I got a
does.
star. I meditated for an hour straight. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that was the app that literally saved me in postpartum. Like for me, the anxiety, the stress, the worry that was involved, I got that app, and I kid you not, like that changed my life. It's been now five
Mhm.
years. I've had the paid app since then, and it literally was like my go-to practice. It's like baby goes down, just going for a little rest. Might be 5 minutes, might be 20 minutes, and then obviously as my mind, now I kind of feel like my mind's kind of an open block. I'm just like, nope, time to meditate. It all gets shut off. And then, of course, when we can shut out all of those external noises, that's where our intuition can come in, right? And how beautiful that is a tool to be able to add to our business, right? Where we might not be spending time doing the 100 things we know we need to do, because the one thing we need to do is the one that is most aligned and most connected to our intuition. So
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
gives us a lot of freedom that way.
Yeah. So, Ashley, for anyone listening who feels like they're on the edge of burnout but doesn't know where to start with self care, what would you recommend that very first step is? I think we've probably already hit this, that taking a few minutes for meditation and finding an app, but
I think the other thing to kind of look at is your diet. That's a big one too, right? People don't even
yeah,
realize that a lot of their anxiety might just be due to methylation issues, might be due to food allergies, food sensitivities, eating a lot of processed food that is just like a chemical, you know, kind of attack, but it's also like your blood sugar is spiking, your blood sugar is coming down. We can't possibly have, a state of like bliss and relaxation and anti-stress if our blood sugar is constantly on a roller coaster. So that's kind of the second kind of big core modality that people are going to start looking at, because there's a
yeah.
big link between anxiety and burnout, and certainly the way that we're eating and nourishing ourselves.
And we've talked about flower essences. They're sort of, I know for me, I usually just put them under my tongue, but you did mention earlier even putting them in your water. Is there one or two sort of flower essence that is kind of your go-to as far as what you recommend for someone that's on burnout?
I really love, this is an essence that I make called red maple, and it's
Mm,
amazing for business owners. And this is a great question because it's like, yeah, how do we balance the need to be productive? And this one's also an essence for problem solving, creativity, and it keeps us so well grounded. Like it's literally just like this deep, deep hug, and it's yeah, the tree essences I can't explain, but they're just so deeply grounded, so deeply rooting. Like the energy, you could just feel it bringing your body down, especially in that lower chakras. Like it's just a feeling of being grounded in a way that you know we could just use literally every day. So those of us who are doing, high level work and working with frequencies, it's like, oh, we need to be well grounded. So red maple is a great one for that. I think anything, rescue remedy is probably another like very common one that people can seek out and find. It's like I always like to recommend what's easy to find. Like obviously you can find it on my website, but it's like it's also easy just to go into a store and grab it too.
which we'll put in the show notes if anyone's listening and would like to reach out to Ashley and check out her website.
Yeah,
So
third kind of factor is like work with a professional, right? Like you and I know when we can hire professional help and people who are going to just get us from A to Z a lot faster than if we're trying to do all these things on our own, right? So it's
yeah,
like the free resources are great, right? They kind of like give us a little tidbits, they give us, some ways to start working, but it's like when you really want to have a deep kind of healing relationship and a deep healing exercise and you want to do it in a shorter speed of time, like hire the people who have the knowledge that are going to get you there, right? Like rather than doing this kind of I'm just going to throw things at the wall until I figure out how to get out of the state of burnout and how do I kind of support my adrenals and how do I, bring myself back into a centered place where I can be productive in my business.
yeah.
Definitely like hiring a professional is a good idea.
Well, I feel when we do that, when we actually, put money down, there is a different level of commitment and follow through than when we just, try the meditation app. And
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing with meditation is for me realizing that feeling like I was doing it wrong because my mind would scroll to something else, but to also just understand, I find a really good meditation teacher is is one who reminds you through the flow of the meditation that it's okay if your brain went somewhere else. Come back to us now. Like, I find that so reassuring because there can be this sense of like, oh, I'm not doing it right. This isn't going to work. And I'm not feeling results. And it's like, well, no, you just need to accept that
Your mind's
It
gonna
is what it is, and stop beating yourself up.
got things on your list. You've got to-dos to do, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a perfect. Yeah, I love those ones too. And I always recommend that people start it with those guided meditations. So it's like you're listening to someone's voice and they're drawing you in, they're relaxing you. And it's like, I'm just going to do whatever you say. Any ones that have like a basis in hypnosis are also really helpful too, because that's, very science focused of really being able to work with the subconscious mind and figure out like, why am I drifting off when? And then I always say like, it's a little bit harder to start with the meditations. Like Insight Timer has an option where you can just do it with a bell, so it's you can either have music or you can have it quiet and they just literally set a timer for you to meditate. And I don't find those ones are as easy, but certainly,
No, my mind would be all over the place.
yeah, I feel you.
I can't remember there was a time that my husband actually caught me when I was sleeping. He's always up before me, but
Yeah.
I had my hands up and I was working
Oh, wow.
while sleeping on my back. And so my hand was going, like with the mouse, because that was when I wasn't using a trackpad. I had a mouse in my hand.
So
So it just
even when I'm sleeping, I'm working. Was that a sign to yourself? Like maybe I might need to take a break?
yeah, doing way too much, way too much.
And I
So
think the other thing, just thinking about is that like during the day, we can find literally a minute or two to pause, right? Like if we, before we hop onto a Zoom, right, we can just come back and just maybe take 3 deep breaths. Like so many of us don't breathe from the right place in our bodies, right? We breathe really shallow from higher up in our lungs, right? Whereas we really should be breathing from our diaphragm. So it's like 2 minutes to do that, or 2 minutes to like pick up a flower essence, or 2 minutes to like do a little root spray or light a candle or anything that's kind of just shifts the energy a little bit. I think that's what we're talking about, right? It's like, oh, yeah, suddenly things feel different. Like you know, cleaned up my office and, I was long overdue. And it's like, that will always shift the energy and then also shift our ability to be present in ourselves.
yeah, it's really not the great big things. It's not the great big commitments that are all time consuming and like a 3-day retreat or anything like that. It really is just the tiniest little thing that you can kind of pick away at through your day, right?
Yeah, that consistency is the key, right? And what a perfect metaphor for business, right? Like so many of us think, okay, well, if I build it, they will come and it's going to launch and it's going to do so great. And it doesn't always happen that way, right? It's like consistency of being on social, or consistency of sending out our email newsletter, or consistency of doing whatever we feel is going to move the needle forward on our business. That ability, the same thing applies to our health and applies to burnout in particular, because chances are you didn't get into that state of stress overnight. It didn't happen in 24 hours, because usually our adrenals, our body is resilient. Like that is something that's been ongoing for weeks, months, even possibly years before the body is just like, nope, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's either you or me, babe.
It's so true. Ashley, I am so incredibly grateful for you being my first guest and reaching out, commenting on my Instagram reel and saying, I want to be a guest. So I really appreciate you being here. I know that we've known each other a long time in business and have, of course, worked together too. So I'm just so grateful to have you as Get Over Your Shit's first guest. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And anybody listening, there will be all kinds of links in the show notes. Find it on Spotify or Apple. And we can't wait to hear from you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay!
I'm like, am I allowed to be normal now?